Hi, today we're going to look at finding a least common multiple, which goes by the acronym LCM. What is a least common multiple? A least common multiple is the smallest positive integer into which two or more integers divide evenly. We often use a least common multiple when we are looking for a least common denominator. Go figure. I recommend these steps. First, you're going to break each term into factors. I'd recommend using prime numbers. Second, we're going to check each factor and list the factor the largest number of times that factor occurs in any term. Long-winded, a little confusing. Hopefully when we go through the examples, this will clarify itself. Third step will be to multiply the list of factors we made in step 2. We're going to start with example 12 and 18. So first we want to break 12 down into its factors. So if we break 12 down, it's 2 times 6. The 6 is 2 times 3. Those are all prime numbers. So 12 is composed of 2 times 2 times 3. For 18, we can break that down into 2 times 9. 9 is 3 times 3. Those are all prime numbers. So 18 is comprised of 2 times 3 times 3. So we have taken care of breaking it down into the factors. Now we want to create our list. So for the least common multiple, let's start with the factors, and let's start with 2. If we take a look, 2 is listed twice in the first term. 2 is listed once in the second term. Twice is more than once, so we're going to put 2 as a factor twice in our least common multiple. Next factor is 3. Occurs once in the first term, twice in the second term. 2 times is more than once, so we're going to list 3 twice in our least common multiple. Now we multiply this together. So if we do 2 times 2 times 3 times 3, we should get 36. So our least common multiple of 12 and 18 is 36. And if you note, 36 is divisible by both 12 and 18 evenly. Our next example, we got 10 and 75. For the 10, we can break that down into 2 times 5. Those are both prime. For 75, let's see, it's 3 times 25, 5 and 5. So 75 is going to be 3 times 5 times 5. So for our least common multiple, we're going to start looking and listing our terms. So if we start, there's a 2 in the first term. So that means there's going to be a 2 in our least common multiple. If we check, there's a 3 in the second term. So it means there's going to be a 3 in our least common multiple. And if we check the 5, it occurs once in the first term, occurs twice in the second term. So for our least common multiple, we got to put 2 5s in there. If we multiply this out, we got 2 times 3 times 5 times 5. We should get 150 for our least common multiple. For our next example, we got 35 and 105. 35 is 5 times 7. 105, let's see, a little tougher to break down since it ends in a 5. We know it's divisible by 5, so it's 5 and 21. 21 should be 3 times 7. So 105 will be 3 times 5 times 7. So for our least common multiple, we start looking at the terms. We got a 3. Each term has 1 5. And each term has 1 7. So if we multiply those out, the 3 times 5 times 7 should give us 105. So in this case, it turns out 105, besides being one of the factors, is the least common multiple. 35 goes into 105 3 times. Now, if you have more than 2 terms, the steps are the same. We just have to look at more factors. So if we start with the 20, break that down into 2 times 10, and 10 into 2 times 5. Those are all prime. So 10 is 2 times 2, or sorry, 20 is 2 times 2 times 5. 18 breaks down into 2 times 9. 9 is 3 times 3. Those are all prime. So 18 is 2 times 3 times 3. And for the 15, that's 3 times 5. Those are both prime already, so we're done there. So for the least common multiple, let's start with the terms. If we look at the 2's, we got 2 2's in the first term, 1 2 in the second term. So we got to put two 2's in our least common multiple. If we look at the 3's, got a pair of 3's in the second term, 1 3 in the third term. Since it occurs twice in the second term, means we have to have 2 in the least common multiple. As far as the 5's go, we got 1 in the first term, 1 in the third. So we're going to have 1 5 in our least common multiple. So if we multiply the 2 times 2 times 3 times 3 times 5, we should get 180 for our least common multiple. Now, if you don't need to deal with variables, you probably want to stop the video here and get right to work. If you do have to deal with variables, good news is this isn't much tougher. The coefficients on the terms we're going to work with the same as we just did. As far as the variables go, we're going to list each variable, and then we're going to look for the largest exponent in each term. So for our first example here, we got 14, which will break down into 2 times 7. We got the 35, which is 5 times 7. So we're going to start the same way we just did. We're going to need a 2. We're going to need a 5. Each term has a 7. So the coefficient on our least common multiple is going to be 70. Now we got to work the variables. So let's start with the x. Now, exponent on x is 1 in the first term, 3 in the second term. 3 is bigger than 1, so we're going to put 3 for our exponent in the least common multiple. Next variable is the y. Note y is squared in the first term, raised to the first in the second term. 2 is bigger than 1, so 2 will be the exponent for the y in the least common multiple. For our next example, let's start with the coefficients. We got the 18, which we've done before, the 2 and the 9, the 3, and the 3. 20 we've also worked out before. All right, so for our least common multiple, let's start with the factors. We got 1 2 in the first term, 2 2's in the second term, so 2's got to get listed twice. If we look at the 3's, there's 2 of them in the first term. Despite the fact there are none in the second term, doesn't matter. Got to put a pair of 3's in our least common multiple. And we also got that 5 there. So for our coefficient, we'd multiply all these out, and we should get 180, so that will be the coefficient of our least common multiple. Now let's look at the variables. All right, let's start with the x. It's to the first in the first term. There's no x in the second term, so it's going to be to the first in the least common multiple. As per usual, if the exponent's a 1, you don't necessarily need to list it. Let's look at the y's. Exponent's 1 in the first term, exponent's 2 in the second term. 2 is bigger than 1, so we're going to put 2 in our least common multiple. As far as the z's go, we got 2 in the first term, 1 in the second term. 2 is bigger than 1, so we're going to put 2 in our least common multiple. So our least common multiple for this one would be 180, x to the first, y squared, z squared. Once again, if you got 3 terms or more terms, process is the same. Just have to be a little more careful as you look at all the factors. We're going to shortcut this a little bit because these are fairly easy coefficients. 9 is 3 times 3. 4 is 2 times 2. And 7 is just 7. So for our least common multiple, if we start with the 2's, we got a pair of 2's from the middle term. We're going to have a pair of 3's from the first term, and we got that 7 from the third term. If we multiply this all out, we're going to get 252. If we start with the variables, let's start with the x. We got 1x in the first term, 3x's in the second term, and a pair of x's being multiplied in the third term. Biggest exponent there is the 3. If we go to the y's, y's got an exponent of 3 in the first term, 2 in the second term, no y in the third term. So once again, we're going to use 3, since that's the biggest exponent on the y's. And for the z, no z in the first term, where there's 4 for an exponent in the second term, 3 for an exponent in the third term. 4 is bigger than 3, so we'll use 4 for the exponent in our least common multiple. So in this case, for those 3 terms, the least common multiple would be 252, x to the third, y to the third, z to the fourth power. I hope this has been helpful. If you're still having trouble, I'd recommend talking to a friend or to your teacher. Good luck, everybody.